So, which are the most in demand and interesting avian carnivores coming out this weekend, and which ones might get left on the shelf? Let's talk through some buying trends for the upcoming T'au and Kroot release, which of these kits are being voted most popular right now, and how much some people might be trying to avoid buying Warhammer altogether. Hello and welcome back to Warsbets Tactics, where today we're talking T'au and Kroot once more, and in this video I thought we'd do a bit of an overview of the upcoming release, and getting a little bit of customer feedback as to which models are good, bad, and the prices of the models, and just trying to understand the minds of T'au players and Kroot players when they're coming up to this big release. Pre-orders for the new T'au and Kroot go live over the next 24 hours or so. The pre-orders will be going live around the world on Saturday the 27th of April, I'll talk about when in just a second, and then shipping and full release for the models will be coming out on the 11th of May. Full pricing is generally out and about for the general release things that aren't web store only already, and for this video I was mainly going to focus on the T'au and Kroot release, the new T'au Combat Patrol, Codex T'au, and the Kroot models. We'd first had the first taste of them in the hunting pack, but now there's a bunch of other things that weren't available before, things like the Hounds, Lone Spear, and another character. There are some other non-Tower things, such as the Sentinels and the Medusa for the Solar Auxilia, plus the made-to-order orcs from Games Workshop's web store, but I thought for this video I'd mainly focus on the T'au and Kroot stuff. For this one I'm mainly going to look through a few graphs and charts to see what people are thinking about picking up, if anything. I'll start with talking through the releases and the prices of them. Kroot do seem to be kind of expensive, and then go forward to what's most popular, and which of the models seem to be most in demand, something that we maybe don't often hear from Games Workshop themselves. As ever, if you were looking to pick up some slightly expensive Birdmen from Games Workshop, it usually makes sense to do so at a discount if it's possible. I'd first go to discount retailers around the world. I do have several examples linked in the video description that help support the channel: Element Games in the UK, Fenris Workshop in Canada, and Wargame Portal in the USA, all offering between 10 and 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures, and that can be one way to support the channel if you were going to pick up some of these anyway. Plenty of other places around the world of course though, and there's always options for things like buying second hand or 3D printing proxies. For the pre-orders actually going live, it often makes sense to be at least somewhat prompt. A lot of stockists will have plenty of stock to go around, but a lot of them might just get exhausted and get sold out of the first wave, only getting restocks after 2 weeks or so, though at least this shouldn't be the same sort of FOMO type rush compared with some of the Battle Force box sets where they're gone in seconds. It looks like the launch has been delayed a bit in Australia and New Zealand, so I guess they'll be coming in a week or so. But otherwise these are the launch times for the other discount retailer stores that I've got linked in the video description. Wargame Portal usually puts things up for pre-order at midnight Central Time, Fenris Workshop usually at midnight Eastern Time, and Element Games has them released at 10 AM in the UK. That one should be the same time as the Games Workshop web store. The US and Canada ones tend to go live at 10 AM Pacific Time, more in the daytime on Saturday. A big thank you to any of you guys who are picking them up via the links in the video description. It does go to help support the channel. In any case, let's whiz through the new releases and talk about prices and things for them, and then what's actually looking popular. First up, the new T'au Combat Patrol box is this one and should be £95 or 160 US. It's one T'au Commander, one set of Fire Warriors, and one Pathfinder team, plus a Devilfish. Quite a lot of miniatures, though lots of infantry and no crisis suits, and maybe a little bit awkward that the commander doesn't have anything to lead. That's replaced the old one with the Ghost Kill. For the most part, this is now out of production around the world, though a few stores with some particularly big inventories might still have stock of them. Element Games in the UK still has a fair amount, I think, again linked in the video description, and I was interested to see whether people prefer this old one versus the new one. The new one does have less cost of kits included, plus less points in the box, at least at time of recording, but to be fair that's not always everything, given it depends on how much you actually want the models here. Otherwise for the releases we've got lots of Kroot. The Kroot carnivores I thought were really quite expensive, £32.50 or $55 for 10 bird boys. Quite nice resculpts and useful for objective scoring in game. Maybe a bit heftier compared with other Horde infantry though. Some other Horde things go for more like $30 or $50 from Games Workshop. The Kroot Hounds are £25 or $40. They get you 5 in the box and replace the old Finecast kit. They can go really quite fast, but are going to be kind of spectacularly bad value for points in game. Like the carnivores, it looks like they're going to be around about the 1 point per dollar mark, definitely not great for getting points on the board. The Krootox Rampagers are £37, €50 or $60 US, kind of expected prices there, the same price as the Outrider bikes or the Scorpec Destroyers, and they're listed at 130 points in the Codex. Maybe a little bit slow and hard to bring to bear in game, but it's interesting enough having a T'au countercharge unit. The Kroot Rider being packaged individually was never going to be good news price-wise. £27, $45 or €35. Again, that's going to be less than 1 point per dollar. If it does keep its 40-point price tag as was printed, you get the option for the Tangle Cannon or Repeater Cannon, of which the Repeater Cannon just seems to be flat better really. Not awful as toughish placeholder units to help screen the backfield perhaps and do a little damage, though it is a bit of a shame they don't really have quite enough raw punch to make themselves the mainline damage dealers and handle heavies for a Kroot army. The Lone Spear is the Kroot Lone Operative at £32.50 or $55, the same price as the Chaplain on bike there, so kind of expected pricing. I think his miniature really is quite a fun one to be fair, getting the option of the Sniper or the Javelin Spears can be helpful for buffing the Kroot, though he does cost quite a lot at 110 points, maybe not one to spam but can do some interesting Lone Operative type things. Then we've got the characters, Flesh Shaper, War Shaper, and the Trail Shaper, which wasn't in the big box. These guys are all £22.50 or $35. Again, I think that they're kind of expensive given that they're Games Workshop character sculpts. 3 infantry size models for over $100 is quite a lot. Maybe kind of expected given what Games Workshop usually charges for them though. If you're on a budget, I feel like most of these are quite able to be kit bashed, maybe particularly the Trail Shaper. Seems like one that you could certainly make from Carnivore or Farstalker parts. I'd guess that people might already have had their fill of War Shapers and Flesh Shapers if they picked up the Hunting Pack box set. Next up, we've got Codex T'au Empire. There's a regular one or a limited edition one that usually costs a bit more than 150% of the normal price. Again, a fair few people might have already got this from the Hunting Pack box or people reselling it from that. The new rules for the army, and to be fair, I think the detachments have done at least fairly well. The new Cowion, Montcar, and the Retaliation cadre. At least the Hunting Pack formation is interesting enough for the Kroot. Definitely helped them be a bit more of an army in their own right versus, say, the Null Maidens for the Sisters of Silence that Custodes got. Finally, for new stuff this week, we've got the dice and the datasheet cards. The datasheet cards just for some references in-game. The faction dice for £18 for 16 dice. These ones sort of a frosted appearance type look with some light blue spots and the T'au faction symbol where the 6 should be. Not sure if they'd be the most easy dice to read on a busy gaming table compared with some, but they do look kind of cool. Finally, alongside all these, I'd bear in mind that the Kroot Hunting Pack box set still is on sale in plenty of places around the world. Non-discounted, this will be £135, $220 or €175. Compared with a few of Games Workshop's launch Battle Force box sets, it looks like they made more of these than they actually had demand for, which is unusual. To be fair, I think that's certainly a good thing, given that it means that people who actually want one did have the opportunity to pick one up, rather than it just going out of stock in seconds. Again, if you give these a search in your own country, you might still be able to find some of them at discount still. Again, out of my affiliate links, Element Games seems to have them for £115 linked in the video description. And if you just want things like Kroot Carnivores, then it might be one of the best places to pick them up, provided you want the other contents, of course. Now we know the full prices for the Kroot. It looks like it was a 23% discount based on miniatures alone, even if you just binned the Codex and data card. If you wanted the Codex and the data cards at full price, it goes up to around about a 42% discount on the overall offering, which isn't awful for Games Workshop. Obviously though, as I've said for just about every single one of the other releases, the Kroot models are pretty expensive for their points in game and things. You only get around about 400 points worth of models in this box, less than 2 points per dollar, which isn't great by regular 40k standards, and certainly not for a big discount box like this. I've heard at least a few people who have picked up multiple of these to try and get a core Kroot force together. Feels like the sort of one where you could maybe justify 2 just about. I feel like maybe doubling up on the characters isn't the biggest win in the world though. I guess for the War Shaper you could build one of each loadout, which makes it a bit less bad. I'm not convinced I'd really want to run multiple Flesh Shapers though. In any case, those are the releases, and I thought I'd get into your feedback on them. On a channel post, I asked for players to give some feedback about the upcoming releases at the weekend, and perhaps as you'd expect, the majority of people who responded to it are active T'au players. I guess if you're not a T'au player or don't have any interest in being one, then you might just not bother with this kind of survey, if literally every answer is going to be no. Looks like slightly over 3/4 of the respondents actively play T'au Empire, though I guess this one doesn't tell the whole story. The no answers might be partly people who are thinking about starting the faction, or people who exclusively play Kroot and not just T'au Empire. I'm sure there will be plenty of people that play neither and have no interest in taking part in them though. Online, there has been a whole ton of discussion about people looking to stop or slow down purchases from Games Workshop recently. I feel like Games Workshop has been going through a bit of a negative publicity cycle, certainly the whole Custodes law changes, but also things like removing entire ranges of model lines like the Stormcast Eternals, which was kind of gutting for the people who'd collected armies of them. And certainly some of the Codex releases have been incredibly unpopular. Quite apart from law changes and things, the rules for Codex Custodes had a lot of people really disappointed and aren't keen to reward Games Workshop with more money. Will be interesting to see if this actually affects sales too much. This one's the first big 40k release since that whole news cycle dropped, so I thought I'd throw in a question asking whether or not people are looking to stop or slow down purchases from Games Workshop with recent law changes and model removals. And these were the results. Looks like around about 11% of survey respondents do have that as a factor for them, and these might be kind of active and engaged players that would usually buy things, otherwise you probably wouldn't be responding to this kind of survey. So while that's far from a majority, it's still a very significant chunk of the player base, particularly maybe for Tau, which aren't particularly connected to Custodes or Imperial type things as much. Looks like they're going to be losing at least some sales from that whole thing. I'm sure some of the prices don't exactly help, particularly in a day and age where 3D printed proxies and things like that are becoming more common. In any case, that whole side of it aside for the moment, I was interested to see which of the new kits would be popular. And first up, I was interested as to how many Tau players actually care about the Kroot releases, as I know that Tau's generally a faction that people more tend to get in for the big battle suits and the fancy pulse rifles and things, maybe more so than really quite different tribal alien auxiliaries. At least for this poll, which admittedly might be a bit more Kroot focused than some, it looks like Tau players either already have at least some Kroot in their army, or if they don't, the majority of people who don't want to acquire at least some. It looks like only 15% worth of Tau players have 0 Kroot and have absolutely no interest in acquiring any others. Even if there might be some biases there, that's actually less than I would have expected. I honestly would have guessed that at least a few more Tau players would be a bit more all about just the battlesuits and not the alien auxiliaries, but it looks like they're popular enough for the vast majority of people to have at least some in their collections. I'm sure there'll be a small subset of people who are doing Kroot in their own right and have no interest in the Tau. Then for the new model appearances, I asked you guys to rate the kit's appearance out of 5 for which ones you think are coolest or least cool. Looks like leading the way there was the Kroot Lone Spear and the Krootox Rampagers. Both of them got a 3.2 out of 5 there. Looks like people are most excited about cool Krootox cavalry as opposed to the more rank and file or the hounds. The characters are sort of middling. The War Shaper seems to be a bit more popular than the Flesh Shaper or Trail Shaper. I do agree he's a bit more of a more dynamic and central looking model as opposed to just a slightly raised regular Kroot. And trailing the way being the less exciting are the rank and file Kroot Carnivores, which I think are nice sculpts for them, but maybe a bit plain and basic, as you really expect for line infantry. People don't really seem to be all as bothered about the hounds though, and they ranked in last. They are maybe a little bit peculiar looking, though maybe that's expected for Xenos biology. And they also are pretty simplistic miniatures, maybe unlikely to be at the top of any sort of ranking in terms of excitement. Otherwise though, appearance on miniatures is one thing, but I was kind of interested as to which kits people actually intended to pick up and buy. This one maybe feels like it's a bit more telling, as it's actually people putting their money where their mouth is, as opposed to just saying, yes, those look kind of cool from over here. Looks like for the most popular rankings, the Kroot Lone Spear is the one that people are most looking forward to. I feel like that's not really a surprise too much. Really quite a fun, cool model riding his chameleonic beastie. Plus, he is pretty much the most exciting thing that didn't come out in the actual Kroot Hunting Pack box set, which people have already got their fill of by now, as well as having some pretty interesting and impactful rules. Fast lone operatives with movement shenanigans are always good. He's got a good enhancement in the Hunting Pack, and also can buff the rest of the Kroot battle lines with a big boosting rule. I still say it's pricey if he does land at 110 points, but I'm not too surprised that people are looking to get their hands on him. Otherwise though, for the most popular things, the Krootox Rampagers were the other one. I guess perhaps they're a unit that you might want a bit more of without having to buy other Kroot Hunting Pack box sets for all the other carnivores and characters that you might not want. And the Kroot Hounds ranked 3rd after that, despite being at the absolute bottom of the model appearance and excitement thing. Again, this is the first players to get their hands on the squad of them, and they feel like they might be a unit that you might want 1 or 2 of for rounding out the army and some cheap chaff screens. Otherwise, at the same sort of level of them, there's Codex Tau Empire, plenty of people still wanting to pick that up who didn't get it in the Hunting Pack box, I suppose. The Trail Shaper's next as a new character that hadn't released before, but being seen as far less an interesting purchase versus the Lone Spear. Again, I do feel like he's maybe a little bit of a slightly basic character miniature, not too different from your standard Kroot Farstalkers or things. The Krootox Rider and more Kroot Carnivores are next, again maybe if you didn't want the whole hunting pack. And then after that, for the Kroot, we have the Warshaper and Flesh Shaper ranking at the bottom for them. Again, if they came in the hunting pack and you already had those sculpts, then no real reason to get more, I don't think, unless you really want to have loads of them. There might not be a bad one for picking up on eBay or secondhand if you did want them as well. I was interested to see that the new Combat Patrol really doesn't seem to be particularly high on people's priorities as well. 29% of people said they might think about getting that one, versus like 57% who are looking for the Lone Spear. Seems like Kroots are across the board outpacing the actual T'au release for the T'au Codex. Finally, looks like the dice and data cards are ranked lowest here. They do feel like they're kind of add-on purchases really that you might want if you want a few more luxury gaming items, though the majority of people seem happy to get by. I guess a fair few people might have data cards already. Putting that all together, that's just those ones visualized. Lone Spears and Rampagers fairly high at the top, lots of other Kroot stuff in the middle alongside the T'au Codex, Combat Patrol, dice and data cards heading up the bottom of the chart. For the Combat Patrol, I thought an interesting thing would be to see whether people prefer the old one or the new one. As mentioned, the old one has the Ghost Kill and Stealth suits, plus the Fireblaze and Ethereal, and it does get you both more points and a higher discount. And it does seem that the majority of people are happy to declare that as the best deal. We had 67% vote for that, and 33% vote for the new one. That does seem like a clear victory for the old Combat Patrol for the Ghost Kill, so maybe a bit of a shame that that one's gone away. But it's definitely not unanimous. A bunch of people did feel that the new one will be more use for them. I feel like getting a Devilfish and a squad that you could build as breachers in the same thing seems like a really useful thing to have for the army. And the Crisis Commander is pretty much the central HQ, even if you will need to pick up some Crisis suits to go alongside, unfortunately. Then finally moving on to the Codex, I thought it would be interesting to get a rough temperature check as to how this one compares with the last 6 Codex releases. Games Workshop codexes have definitely had a rocky time recently with several massive misses, but broadly speaking in terms of the court of public opinion, the T'au haven't done too badly. The Orcs win the Codex race with a 64% approval, Necrons following that up with 56, and the T'au Empire only just behind that with 53. 10th Codexes really do seem to be a bit of a game of winners and losers. There's a huge jump next, down an extra 30% worth of approval to Dark Angels, and then Adeptus Custodes and Admech. At least in terms of codex writing, looks like the people writing the Imperial codexes just haven't been having their creations being anywhere near as well received versus what happened with the Xenos ones. It was maybe a bit surprising that Codex T'au Empire only had 4 detachments in it versus the more that most of the rest have, particularly as T'au are a fairly major faction as the game goes. But I think there's maybe some argument that it's best to have 4 detachments that have all been written well and are genuinely interesting enough to play, versus far more where most of them are kind of garbage or boring. Otherwise, just for the rough temperature check as to what that translates to, I also chose to ask you whether or not the T'au Codex will be interesting and strong. Obviously, part of that's going to depend on points costs. Broadly, people seem to be kind of neutral or positive about that, around about half of you saying that it's likely to be both interesting and strong, around about the other half mainly being neutral or unsure, only a very small minority saying that they thought it wouldn't be all that great. At the moment, the T'au Empire do look like they're coming from a position of strength, unlike armies like the Adeptus Custodes, where their book felt like a downgrade across the board. It looks like there might be kind of similar strength after this one. Some cool new detachments and a few datasheet boosts. Admittedly, the crisis change was perhaps a bit weird and people were a bit mixed on that, but for the most part, T'au players seem to be at least relatively happy with their new book. In any case though, would certainly be interested to hear your thoughts on the release. If you had any interest in carnivorous avians before, would you be looking to pick up any Kroot, or have any of the things like the Games Workshop drama or the very expensive prices put you off at all? Look forward to hearing what you have to say down in the comments or reactions to any of the graphs and polls here. I'll be interested to have a read over the comments. As mentioned, for those of you looking to pick up anything, the links in the video description should be going live over the weekend in the early hours of the morning. Feel free to check them out to save some money versus the Games Workshop web store and support the channel a bit. There's plenty of other places elsewhere though, and of course other options to Games Workshop's miniatures in general. A big thank you to any of those choosing to support the channel in that way though. In any case, look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more things about Games Workshop's model news or releases. I'll certainly be back to talk about a few more balanced data slate things over the next 24 hours or so. Finally, besides the discount links, I'd also just like to quickly mention the channel's Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description down below. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.